Hello, I'm Brian with glutenfreehomebrewing.com. Today we're going to talk about brewing gluten-free beer in the Grainfather all-in-one brew system. The Grainfather and other brew systems out there uses a mash tun that's inserted into a boil kettle, and you conduct the mash, lift the mash tun out, conduct the sparge, your boil, and then transfer it to the fermentation tank. The problem with all conventional homebrew systems, all-in-ones or conventional mash tuns, is that gluten-free malts are very small and they tend to pass through any false bottoms, any kind of filters, and that's true with the Grainfather as well. If you remember, last February we had JP Beerley from Beerley Brewing down here, and we did a questions and answers, and we talked about how to modify a false bottom using a stainless steel mesh from the splatter screen that you get from the local kitchen store, and cutting that down to fit on your false bottom, and then that would hold the gluten-free malts back. So we're going to apply the same method to the Grainfather, and they have two perforated plates, a top and bottom perforated plate, and the one that we need to modify is the bottom plate, because that's what's going to hold back the gluten-free malt. We contacted Grainfather. They said that the gap in the perforated plates is 1.27 millimeters. We know we mill our millet and buckwheat down to 0.65 to 0.7, and the rice to 0.9 and 0.95. So we know those are easily going to pass the perforated plates on the Grainfather. We have an A and B plan here. We weren't sure how the bottom plate attached to the bottom of the mash tun, and there's a little bit of a lip here that obviously keeps the plate from falling down, but we weren't sure if it was specifically designed a way to set in there that wouldn't let us to modify the bottom plate. But as it turns out, we can pretty much do whatever we want. And so what we're going to do is do the same exact thing we did with the false bottoms. We bought the splatter screen from the local kitchen store, and that gave us the stainless steel mesh that we need to set on top of the bottom perforated plate. So on this side, you can see the large perforated holes. This is the other side where we have attached a very thin mesh screen, and that will hold back the gluten-free malt. We had a plan A and a plan B because we weren't sure if the silicone seal that Grainfather has around the plate, and that's what allows you to make a very tight seal in the mash tun, so that stays in place and malt doesn't pass by. We weren't sure if that would accommodate even the very thin additional stainless steel mesh screen that we were going to place on top. So we bought an extra silicone seal as our plan B, and it turns out that there is some minimal space for a very thin stainless steel mesh screen, so we were able to fit the additional mesh screen using the original silicone seal, and it holds together all in one piece. We are having some additional stainless steel screens cut as well, and depending on how thick those are, we may have to go to our plan B, which is to use the second seal. And when we do that, we're just going to set one seal on top of the other seal. There's nothing in the mash tun that will prevent us from doing that, and they'll just very nicely sit on top of one another. When you cut the screen, or have a screen cut, these are essentially woven stainless steel mesh screens, and the edges, if there isn't anything to keep them together, they're not necessarily going to stay together, and same with the hole that we have to punch out in the middle for the Grainfather. So keeping those intact is really important. We don't want them to be frayed and fall apart, because we want to get the most value for our dollar and not have to replace them all the time. But we also don't want things passing along in our beer either. So the silicone seal definitely seems to address that issue, because it's holding the outside of the screen that we had cut. And the reason that there's a hole in the center here is in the Grainfather, there is this bottom overflow pipe, and there's a nut on the bottom. And that is going to take care of the perforated edges on the bottom, because this fits right in there, and you screw it into place, and now we have the center of the mesh screen that we cut out firmly held into place, and we have the sides, the edges of the stainless steel screen that we cut held in place with a silicone seal. So we're pretty confident that that's going to hold back, remain intact and hold back the gluten-free malts. The other filter in the Grainfather is the filter inlet for the recirculating pump. And this has the same gap in the perforated plate, the 1.275 millimeters on the Grainfather. And so if we're not stopping the malt from passing through the mash tun, it's easily going to pass through this filter inlet and go into our pump. And that's stress that we really want to avoid the pump going through. So we're going to give this a test. We're going to test our additional screens that we're having cut. We're going to kind of keep an eye on how that affects, or if that affects recirculation, flow rates, efficiency, anything like that. Our thought process is we want to use a gap in a stainless steel mesh screen that's as large as possible, that still holds back the gluten-free malt, so that we can maximize the ability for liquid to pass. And we're going to test that out using a multitude of different screens that we're having cut, and we're going to report all those findings on our website, along with everything else that we find out along the way that pertains to brewing gluten-free beer in the Grainfather all-in-one system. So I hope you stay in tune.